What's going on, everyone? Today we have the Father's Day patch, and it makes sense because Yone is back to slap everyone into submission. So in the S tier, we have Yone Reroll. Turns out if you buff the level 7 rolling odds to make 3 costs easier to get, and also if you buff Yone and his attack speed as well, Yone is going to be back in the meta. So we did some data checking right before making this video. Compared to when Yone was OP, he's averaging a 3.68 as a 3-star right now. He was actually more OP in the past, believe it or not, but he's still very, very good. Probably the best unit right now. But if you don't like reroll, there's going to be Syndra Dryad, still very solid there. Ethereal Blade Shen. This one has been doing tremendous work. It's going to be the best augment right now. But essentially, most games defaulting into Yone or Syndra Dryad going to be pretty good depending on your items in the early game. So just make sure you tailor everything to that. Now onto the A tier, we have Ghostly Zyra, Kobuko Lucky Paws, Storied Champion Garen, Sage Lillia, Umbral Alune, and Dragon Lord 5 costs to start things off. These are all going to be pretty balanced. We have a 2-cost reroll, we have 2 other champion augments, we have a 4-cost, we have a 3-cost reroll, and we have a 5-cost comp. Level 8 Duelist going to be following that. Midnight Siphon Yorick, Kayn Lee Sin, Kog'Maw Reroll, Duelist Reroll. Duelists, you'd expect them to do a bit better. So if we type in Duelist over here, sort by 3-star average placement, Volibear and Tristana, they're at like a 4.0, almost exactly. Not quite good enough yet. They did not see quite the same buff as the Yone comp did. Kaisa Bruiser is going to be next, followed by Story Weaver Bard, Lux Reroll, Janna Zyra and their related comps, Arcanist Warden, Mythic Lillia, Ashe Warden. This one took quite a big hit. Sniper damage was being reduced, and we could also see a Duelist change up here since we were just talking about before. My apologies for not coming out with a patch preview this week. I just had stuff come up. But you know that I always have you for the meta snapshot as I do every single Friday. Built Different got a pretty big buff, so this one bumped up to the A tier. We check Built Different out right now. It's averaging perfectly 4.5. Very good job. And then next up, we have Alune Invoker Reroll, Syndra Fated, Aphelios Reroll, and Dryad Reroll. Lots of things to kind of go for in the S and A tier. But there is like a pretty big drop off from like the top comps versus the rest of the field. As you all know, S are pretty much things you could kind of really aim for if you get like any sort of decent start for them. A tier, you kind of have to pick and choose your spots. B tier, you have to have amazing starts for them. So Shen and Senna going to be dropped down. Ghostly 4-cost, Ink Shadow, Story Weaver, Reroll, Bard, and like Kha'Zix, stuff like that. You don't really have to play those. But on to the meat of the comps. We have starting off in the S tier, the Kayn and Yone comp. So in case we all forgot how to play this, and I'm going to be going over every single comp that we've covered so far, we want to default back into the 3-cost reroll mode for Yone, but it's going to be a bit different. Most people aren't too obsessed with the Heavenly so far. This could change in the future, but people are just running it with like the 4 Reaper and getting some sort of Umbral in. Then you kind of run any complementary 4-cost you can kind of use. I don't know if you all remember, but back in the day, Kayn wasn't really a real unit, so you can focus a bit more on the 4-cost units, whereas before it was a one-man show with Yone. Any frontline items will do. The same ones work from before. Titans, Bloodthirster, Edge of Night. For Kayn, kind of the same thing. I think Edge of Night's probably the most important item for Kayn though. But as you can see, there are a bunch of different options you can kind of try on your Yone. Kayn, kind of the same thing there. But pretty much any of the general AD frontline items are going to work out perfectly. If you ever get a Reaper Spatula, it's going to work great on Sylas. Sylas is both a damage dealer and a tank, very effective in that front. Just put the frontline AP items on him, so stuff like Crown Guard, really good. You could even give him like a BT. Lots of different things work on Sylas. All your leftover items are going to go on him, and then some utility can come from Kindred, or if you need a little bit of a better mid-game. If you want more details in how to play this comp, head on over to the website bunnymuffins.lol. We go over like the full how to play section down here, and even more item recommendations and augments there. But let's move on into the next comp, which is going to be Syndra Dryad. If I remember correctly, this comp wasn't touched too much compared to all the other 4-cost comps. And it's a pretty balanced comp because it goes into kind of 2 directions. You go both into the Dryad and into the Fated. Both of them work out really well, and if I find myself without any sort of +1 emblem, it's a pretty decent comp to go for. Like, if you want to go for full Fated Syndra, you kind of want to have like a +1 Fated emblem. The same can be said of a bunch of other different comps, but this one is pretty decent on its own without any crazy augments or any crazy emblems. Main tank's going to be either Thresh or Ornn. Make one of them your utility tank, make the other your main tank. And then just throw mana items on Syndra and AP items on her too. Leftover items are going to be on like Azir, Annie, things like that. Maybe even Set, depending on what you get dropped. But this one's going to be standard leveling, so if you like playing for 4 cost, this is going to be the comp for you. This patch can pretty much default it for most of your games. Ethereal Blade Shen is going to be the next comp up. This one is going to be a 2 cost reroll if and only if you get the Ethereal Blades augment, as we see here. Just filter by like the best augments. It's going to be the top 2 pretty much, right? Just make sure you have the right items for it. You want like a bunch of Rage Blades, and then you just roll for Shen 3, Yorick 3. It's a very simple comp to play, so if you get it, definitely go for it. Next comp up we have is Ghostly Zyra. This is another 2 cost reroll comp. You also go for the Shen, but this time you focus your main damage dealer as a Zyra, and 1 Shojin plus a bunch of ability power items, you're going to be good to go. Morgana for utility, and then Stone Plates on Shen. And really just focus on Shen and Zyra. The Riven 3-star and the Aatrox 3-star are definitely super optional. So don't hold your breath for them, because they're not going to change that much about your team. But if you get them for free as you roll down, you might as well pick them up. Lucky Paws Kobuko, another hero augment. If you get the Lucky Paws augment, definitely go for this. Bunch of health items or tank items on Kobuko, and then play Bruisers, plus some sort of damage dealer in the back. Ideally, some form of Morello applying backline damage dealer, because that way your Bruisers tank everything up, and then the burn slowly kills everyone. But of course, you only want to play this if you have a bunch of Kobukos to start off with. Same with Storied Champion Garen. You want a bunch of Garens to start off with, but this time, instead of full tank items, you kind of want the Bruiser AD items, and then just slap in a bunch of Wardens, play some Morello or red buff in the backline, and it's kind of the same thing. My favorite part about both of these champion augment comps is that they're really easy to play. So if you're not trying to be like super skill intensive while you're playing TFT, they're definitely well worth a try, because almost anyone can pull them off if you have like any semblance of a reasonable start for them. Next one up we have is Sage Lillia. This one's going to be a great AP comp if you get a lot of ability power items, because you have a ton of item users for them. You have Lillia, you have Morgana. You could even throw in like some random legendary that uses them potentially. And then what I love most about this is that it's a pretty flexible comp. You could run all sorts of different units because you go wide in terms of your traits. Look at this. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I think. Maybe even a little more. I don't know how to count that high. So that means you don't have to run every single unit you see here. You could switch stuff up. For example, if you don't want to run Janna because you have like a 2-star Rakan randomly, you still keep your Dragon Lord, you know? Yeah, you lose Invoker, but it's not that important. Maybe you have an Azir in the late game and you replace something else with that. So that's probably one of the main strengths of this comp. It's another one of those comps that don't really need any emblems because you don't go deep into any trait. Sage emblem, while nice, it's not gonna like make or break your game. So getting to like 5 Sage isn't the same power as getting to like 7 Fated or something like that. Well, at least considering the amount of emblems you need to run, plus all the units. But overall, great 4-cost comp. If you want to just default level 8, this is going to be the perfect comp for you if you're going for ability power items. Next one up we have is Umbral. Umbral got a little stronger because 1, you could use Yone a bit in the mid game. He got buffed a bit. 2, the level 7 odds are being changed and it makes it much easier to hit Alune 3-star. But one thing you want to keep in mind when playing this is that you definitely want an Umbral emblem, because it helps your team so much. It makes it so easy to get to 6 Umbral. For example, you could play Yone before you get set, and then with the +1, you could run everything that you want. Next, having Umbral on this different unit is really good for them because the Umbral buff is disgusting huge. Like the execute that you get from this, it's like a 25% health execute, which is absolutely nuts, you know? And it also makes your whole board turn into like the Umbral hexes, which again also is pretty nice. That way you don't have to position in this banana arc kind of thing, and it makes swapping right before the round starts a lot easier. Next one up we have is going to be Fast 9 and 5 costs. One thing that you could kind of try doing this patch when going Fast 9 is maybe roll a little bit on level 7, get some 2-star 3-cost units, and then use those to Fast 9 with. I was just thinking about that the other day because of the patch notes. When they changed leveling odds a bit, you could play a little bit different to reach whatever desired endpoint you want. And I know it doesn't happen all the time, it's just a couple percentage points at the end of the day. Sometimes you just have to hit, you know? But it is something worth exploring. But the main way to play Fast 9 and 5 costs is just playing really greedy, getting a ton of gold through like some sort of econ augment, and then somehow naturaling a couple of units. That way you remain relatively healthy while having like a ton of gold, and then you level up, roll down, and try to win big, big, big. Depending on what unit you get, you're going to want to itemize them a bit differently, but most of them can kind of use whatever item you get. You don't really itemize for specific legendaries unless one of them is super, super crucial, but this is not one of those comps. When you want to itemize for a very specific legendary, it must be like some sort of big trait comp, such as like Duelists, for example, the next comp we have here. Like, once you have your Lee Sin items, once you have like some Tristana or Volibear items, then you could start thinking about like, hey, maybe I get some Aurelia items. Maybe I want a red buff off Carousel. I'm going to put it on the Hui I have for now. And then once you get Aurelia, sell it, swap the red buff onto Aurelia, and you're going to be good to go. This is still a solid comp, even though they kind of buffed reroll Duelists. They did nerf like regular Duelists. I believe in the patch notes, we have like at the very top at the trait section, I think they lowered the attack speed that you get from it. Yeah, at 4 and 6 Duelists, they lowered it by 1%, but it's like a stacking buff, so it's actually a bit more than that. But all in all, the comp's still good. It went from like S tier to A tier, still very serviceable at the A tier. Next one up we have is Midnight Siphon Yorick, another hero augment comp. Just play 6 Behemoth, get Yorick 3-star at level 6, doing a 2-cost reroll, and then find some sort of secondary carry, and that's really all you have to do there. Sin Kayn 4-cost comp. It's just the trifecta of Kayn, Lee Sin, Morgana. Got a bunch of AD bruisers up front, utility in the back, and then just a bunch of heavenly units just to complement your team, because why not? Next one up we have is Lux Reroll. They actually buffed a bunch of the Lux stuff this patch, I believe. I remember seeing it in the summary somewhere. Yeah, Boiling Point. So if we look at Boiling Point, we check it out here. It went up to a 4.3, which definitely is better. I think last patch it was at like a 4.5 or whoa, 4.72, never mind. So it definitely got a ton better. You now gain a Lux and an Amumu. But what I really like doing with Boiling Point is just doing like the attack speed Lux. It's kind of fun to do. And then if you ever get +1 Porcelain to 6 Porcelain, it's completely bonkers. Probably one of my favorite comps of this set. Next up we have is Kog'Maw Reroll. It's pretty much just an augment check if you have too much candy at the start, or if you just start the game with like a ton of Kog'Maws and Cho'Gath. It's also an item check. You need blue buff and Nashers. That's really all there is to this comp. Just do 1-cost reroll. You have the core 5 of Kog'Maw, Caitlyn, Cho'Gath, Malphite, and Nico, and then the other 2 units could be Mythic, could be Behemoth, could be like 2 random ones. Maybe you just natural some like 2-star 4-cost or 2-star 5-cost. Just throw them in. Doesn't really matter that much. Next up we have is Duelist Reroll. Again, the comp got nerfed a bit because of the Duelist changes, but it got buffed because of the rolling odds. But other people are going for the level 8 Duelist, so it's a bit tricky to play because you get contested a bit unintentionally. But if you ever get like one of the good reroll augments, such as like Golden Ticket, maybe the like Team Builder, and like Perfect Item, Volibear, and Tristana, you could still go for this comp instead of the level 8 Duelist. It's still going to be really powerful. You can kind of flex between the two, like use the Tristana and Volibear as your mid game. Plan on going for the level 8 Duelist, and then if you happen to get a bunch of these, just finish the roll down for them, and then do the reroll Duelist build. Still very good, just not the best, you know? Next up we have is Trickshot Bruiser. These units are pretty solid. Not as powerful as it once was, but if you need like a 4-cost attack damage comp, it's either this or the Ashe comp, and the Ashe comp got hit pretty hard. We'll check them out in just a moment, but a couple of different builds here. We have like 4 Trickshot, 4 Bruisers, so it's kind of mirrored in terms of the 4 frontline, 4 backline, because with Sniper Warden, we have 4 Warden, 4 Sniper in the back, and then we also have a 5-cost version down here. Next one up, we have is Storyweaver Bard. Again, leveling odds did help this comp out a little bit, but not enough because you need perfect items for this comp, and no one really plays Tahm Kench because he kind of sucks this set, not gonna lie there. He just doesn't do much compared to other 3-cost tanks when you compare him to like Thresh and things like that. But the good news is that no one goes for him, so as long as you get perfect item Bard, which is double Rage Blade, Gunblade, you kind of have to just get Tahm Kench 3 as well because they just complement each other based on the Mythic, and then hope your Bard carries. That's really all there is to it. Sometimes you go for Soraka 3. Soraka, I think she got buffed too recently, right? But overall, pretty solid comp. You just need very good items for, not very good items, very specific items for it to work. Next up we have is Janna, Zyra, and Zoe Soraka. It really just depends if you have a lot of the champions that you see here, and if you have the augment 2 healthy. That's going to be the most important augment for this comp. Wouldn't really play it otherwise, but I have seen some people hard force Janna, and it goes okay. I wouldn't say it goes well, but the augments make a huge difference. Next up we have is Arcanist Warden. This one is just like a mix between, again, Arcanist and Warden, kind of as the name implies, but you could go like 6 Arcanists, you could go like 8 Arcanists, 4 Warden, 6 Warden, depending on what units you're hitting and what stage of the game it is. If it's kind of early, I kind of like the 6 Warden, but I don't really bank on it too much because there are too many crappy Wardens at 1 cost, so you don't really want to run those too much. They did buff Lissandra a little. The loot chance went from 40% to 45%. It's not the biggest thing ever. Like, Lissandra's still kind of weak if we look at the data, I believe. Let's go to champions. Let's look at the 5 costs. She's actually kind of in the middle now. What was she last patch? She was a 3.97 before. Last patch, she was a 4.01. So not too much of a big change there. But you have to remember, sometimes people just run Lissandra and then drop her. Play rate is 0.58 versus 0.58 from before. So it's really just the same champion. Didn't really get buffed up too much. Like, some of her comps are better though. Like, the Lux comp got buffed a bit, so she's a bit more useful there. But the Ashe comp did suffer a bit, and sometimes people use her for the porcelain. Next up we have is Mythic Lillia. If you ever get Mythic Spatula or Mythic Emblems, running this to get to 7 Mythic is pretty powerful with the 4 Invoker. Lillia just casts a ton, blows people up. Ways in the back, just kind of applying Morello to everyone. And then in the front line, you have Annie and Silas and Nautilus. All of them will do. If you ever get a Mythic Emblem, drop it on your Annie. She becomes like a Giga Tank. You could also drop it on Silas too if you get extras of them, if you're running Tahm Kench for Bruiser. But if not, just put the rest of your tank items on Nautilus. So it could be like Annie Nautilus, it could be like Annie Silas, depending on what you kind of have running that game. You could also drop Tahm Kench and Silas for 2 other things, such as 1 Warden plus 1 other Mythic unit. Really depends on what you're kind of going for that game and what you're hitting. So play around what units you hit. This is a bit flexible. The core units, I would say, are Kog'Maw, Hui, Azir, Lillia, Annie, and Nautilus. The other 2 kind of a bit flexible. Next one up we have is Ashe Warden. This is a 4 sniper, 4 warden comp with a bunch of random synergies kind of complementing them. They're not that important, but like sometimes they do a little bit, you know, not that much though. Your main focus is on Ashe, getting Rageblade, Last Whisper on her. Main tank on a Mumu if you get him to 3-star. If not, it's probably going to be Nautilus. And then if you have leftover attack damage items, you could probably throw them onto your set. And yeah, pretty good standard leveling comp. If you're going towards like an AD build, it's either going to be this or the Kai'Sa build. Both a bit weak right now, not the best, but not the worst. Built different, got buffed up a bit. It's pretty average, 4.5. I'd make some sort of average joke involving that number, but I made that joke like too many times in the past year. So I will skip it for now, but just buy 4-cost units. Play duplicates of your 4-cost units, and then sometimes you 3-star them. Those are going to be the games where you're probably going to win. But my favorite item when playing built different is probably going to be the Spear of Shojin, because all the units can kind of use them. You don't really know what 4-cost unit you're going to hit easily, and you want to play around that unit. And frankly, like Spear of Shojin, it works on like most of the 4-cost units. It works on Syndra, works on Morgana, Lillia can use it, Ashe can use it. It's not the best on them, like Ashe and Kai'Sa, it's not like the best on them, but it is definitely usable. So that's something to kind of consider when playing this comp. It's just like a good general flexible item if you don't know what to build in the early game. That and like maybe like a Giant Slayer, it fits on everyone. And then you probably want a Morello on some random unit. And then once you get your 2-star 4-cost of your choice, get a specific item for them after that. And you'll be itemizing like multiple of them, so don't worry too much about clogging up your main carry, because you'll definitely have like secondary and tertiary carries when you do this. Oh, also, built different is really good on econ, portals, and encounters, because the comp really revolves around getting like a fast 8 going and like lots of gold at level 8, and those portals just help this comp out much more than other comps. Next one up we have is Alune Invoker Reroll. Again, 3-cost reroll got buffed a bit, but there are better versions of Alune out there, so I'd probably play the other Alune. Next one up we have is Syndra Fated. Again, better Syndra comps exist, but if you have Fated emblems, definitely go for this comp. Getting the 7 Fated, absolutely nuts with Ornn with the Fated spat. Just make sure you have a blue buff plus some sort of AP items on your Syndra. Next one up we have is Aphelios Reroll. Same thing kind of here. You want the +1 Fated emblem in this comp. It's not the end of the world if you don't get it, but there are much better comps to play in terms of 3-cost reroll. If we'd like data check this Aphelios right now, it's going to be skewed a bit, right? Because he is kind of played in a bunch of comps. He's actually averaging like a 3.6. Maybe it's a bit underrated, but I'm guessing people only go for it in like super specific circumstances. Yeah, we can see right here the 3-star rate is a 5.32. If we look at the other 3-cost units and look at 3-star rate, Yone's at the top, same with Bard, same with Zoe, same with Alune, and all that. And at the bottom, we kind of have Aphelios at 5%, probably because all the Ashe sniper players are taking all the Aphelii or whatever they're called. Next one up we have is Dryad Reroll. Gnar and Kindred, they're okay, but not the best comp. If I could get to 6 Dryad, I would play this. If not, probably better things to go for, unless you start off the game with like tons of Gnars, tons of Kindred. And then now we have the B tier. Shen and Senna, they've seen better days to say the least. 4-cost Ghostly, same thing. It's not that all these comps are like awful or anything, they're just like much more situational, or you can just use them to kind of fast 9. But overall, at the top we have Yone back in action, Syndra for 4 costs, and then Shen to round out the S tier. In the A tier, lots of random comps there. You're gonna have to decide early on in your game like which ones to kind of angle for, and then commit sometime during the early parts of stage 3. I like super committing either after the augments in stage 2-1 or 3-2, depending on what my start is. That's generally like an easy way to play if you kind of want to like streamline how to play TFT and not complicate things too much. Of course, it's always best to look out at every point in the game, but we are only human, so we don't always have the energy to do that. But if you are looking to climb just a little bit more, I highly recommend going and checking out the Unranked to Diamond video that we posted a while back. I'll try to remember to leave a link in the description or in the comments down below. But that's going to be it from me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this, and I'll see you all next time.